All right, welcome this week to the Church Planner Podcast. I am Robert Frazier,
I'm Tim Galley.
and we're here for you guys. We actually exist because we just love and believe that church planting is a big part of God's plan for the world. So, welcome to the Church Planner Podcast. If you've never been here before, this is your first episode. You're coming in 470 some episodes in. Like, first of all, I want to say welcome to the show, because I think that this has been a huge part of my spiritual and church planting journey. So welcome to the show. And secondly, I want to say, hey, this is a good spot to jump in. So Tim and I just started our Wednesday edition of the Church Planner Podcast just 2 months ago. And we are focusing on the beginning of the journey. Like, what do we need to know to start in the church planting journey for those of you who are at the beginning stages? So, welcome to the show. Tim is an incredible pastor who leads the disciple making and formation in small groups, adult ministries at one of the largest churches in New England called Grace Chapel. And he's one of my best friends. My name is Robert Frazier, and I'm here because I live church planting. We planted 6 years ago. I lead a church planting network here in Boise, Idaho. And I think that church planting is the way that God brings about transformation to the church. It's through new expressions and reforming old expressions. So welcome to the show. We're going to talk for like 10 or 15 minutes about nonsense. So if you really want to get into the content, just fast forward 10 or 15 minutes. But if you like getting to know us, stay around. Tim, it's Memorial Day. It's been the long weekend. You guys are still in school for a couple more weeks with your kids. Our kids got out on Thursday.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like summer. It's like real summer here. I want to hear, what was your long weekend like? What'd you guys do as a family?
Hey, before that, that was a very kind introduction that you gave me. That
Oh,
was really kind.
you're
If
welcome.
I can in turn, um,
No, don't make it
reciprocate
weird,
here.
man. Don't do it.
That's gonna be super weird, super weird. And so if you're new to the podcast, the way that we got connected is that we used to work at that exact same church, Grace Chapel. We were very, very close friends. And then Robert decided by surrender to the Holy Spirit that he was going to move back to Boise and church plant there. And friends, you know that there's certain people in your life that you always wanted to stay in touch with. Well, Robert was not that for me. There was like five other guys that I would have preferred to
But
play
no
for.
one else asked you, so
So I guess I'm playing. I'm playing.
oh,
I
that
just
was a
wanted
good
to ruin
setup
it.
though. You
I
you
just wanted to
killed it.
ruin it.
That was awesome. That was great. Man, well, it's Monday night, and we both just finished watching the Celtics get their booties handed to them in Game 7. I honestly, it was so tragic. I don't even want to talk about it, which tells you a lot. After this hope for a comeback of the ages. So we're gonna stay away from sports today. For those of you who hate sports, and you're like, why do these guys always start with sports? We're gonna start with your life, Tim. So what did you guys do this weekend? How did you celebrate the memorial?
So on Friday, we earlier this week we realized that this was going to be the first weekend where one of my sons did not have baseball games, the other son did not have
Mm.
soccer games, and all that. So we were going to have like a sport free weekend. So my oldest son and I had decided that we were going to go down and watch sports. So we drove down to we drove down to
Yeah,
Yankee Stadium.
you told me about on Friday, right? You guys went down to
Yep.
Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, so like every now and then we do this. Like usually in the summer though, like you go to a 7 o'clock game and then like the morning matinee on afternoon matinee on Saturday. So we
Hmm.
get 7 o'clock games Friday night against the Padres. We rarely ever get to see the Padres. Fernando Tatis and Juan Soto, and
And the
Xander
and the
Bogaerts.
Padres are all of a sudden a team you actually want to see for the first time in
Yeah,
decades.
yeah, they really are. And then Saturday, we went to the 1 o'clock game. And we split. The Padres won Friday night. Yankees won on a dramatic walk off on Saturday afternoon. And then I wanted to take my oldest is in ninth grade, and we usually take a walk through Manhattan Midtown. This time I showed him the Village, and I'm like, look, here's like where the cool kids at the NYU campus like hang out, and here are all the odd folks. They also hang out at your campus as well, and you should know that.
Hmm.
Like this is
Hmm.
this is a city school. So we walked around for a little bit, got some. We actually went. I don't know if you remember this. We had dinner at Dos Caminos. That is a place that you and I ate at
I
in the
do remember
village.
that.
Um,
Yeah.
we went to some ministry event, and
Yeah. We
I
we
was like,
used
"Oh,
the
this is the
ministry
one."
event as an excuse to go down to New York City, which is like a surprisingly great part about Boston is I went to New York City like 7 or 8 times over a few years, just because it actually isn't a bad little day trip.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did
Well,
that.
so
Came home, church, barbecue. Here we are.
yeah, were the Yankees cheating with too much resin on their hands pitching, or what was did you notice any cheating while you were there?
There was no cheating, and previously there was just too much. I think is resin. Yeah, the resin bag.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just maybe it was too
It's
much sweat. The
it's
guy
so
sweats a
it's
lot
so
too.
nonsense. Do you remember when Clay Buchholz used to get his whole head sopping wet in between every inning, and then he would just do this and just like wet down the ball?
I'm also old enough to like remember like Phil Necro like having like metal razor blades in his glove to
That
like
he
just
could
shave
scruff
off.
up the ball
Yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I was actually at the game in Boston when Michael Pineda like got caught. He had like a big fat like pine tar on his neck. Do you remember this? And
That's crazy.
he was
I
like,
was with you at that
you were
game.
with you. Okay. I was I couldn't remember. I went to so many Red Sox games. That was like the third baseline. We had great seats that game. Those were like Grace Chapel tickets. I
I think
I
so.
will never forget him. Like you and I are like, is there something on his neck? And he's like, all of a sudden the hump's out there because he has this like it's like the length of his
Yeah,
neck.
yeah. It
And
was
pine
painful.
tar isn't quite his color of black. Like it just
Yeah.
wasn't the right brown for him. Maybe he should get like a colored, pine tar that's like closer to his skin substance, or he needed to like do a larger area so that it blended in more. All right,
Y-
sorry, we always drift into sports. This is what happens.
Yeah, I know. I know. I wonder if Sephora sells those types of products.
The colored pine tar for all skin types, which in baseball you actually need. You need every skin type.
Too far, too far.
Okay, got a
Sephora. Oh
little
man.
funny. Okay, so
What did you do
you
this weekend,
guys
man?
you drove back Saturday.
We drove back Saturday, got back real late, went to church. Um, Sunday was a beautiful day, so we just laid low, enjoyed,
Mm,
did a little bit of yard work, all that stuff. And then we have dear friends who just had a cookout
nice.
earlier today. Came back, watched the Celtics game. I'm not a Celtics fan, but I was cheering for you guys.
Oh,
That would have been pretty
your
dramatic.
son. Your sons are Celtics fans, right? Like that's kind of
One son is a Celtics fan, the other is a Sixers fan.
okay. Okay.
I
I mean,
cheer for
that's
storylines.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially in the NBA, there's fun storylines every season. There's
Yeah,
something coming out, and the NBA totally engineered this storyline because after the LA got swept, the NBA is like, we cannot allow the Celtics to get swept because they'd lose so much money off of the TV deal. It's like, yeah, we can't give up 2 weeks of games. You know,
yeah,
that's
I
what
don't know.
happens.
I don't get into those conspiracy theories where the NFL's rigged, the NBA is rigged. This guy did this.
No, I don't think
I
it's
just don't.
rigged, but I do think it's fascinating. After we were in the same spot after a May that never ended, we were in Boston the first week, and then we had like a sporting event 5 or 6 nights a week for like
Mm,
the whole month, end of school year stuff. We moved our preschool at our church into a new building. I've just been to the wall for 4 weeks. This was the first weekend we didn't have kids sports, and so we did nothing. Like we took our
nice.
really good Sabbath on Saturday, and then Saturday evening our youngest Winnie just started puking like right as the kids were going to bed.
Oh,
So Malia was up all night. She missed church on Sunday, and then she got sick yesterday. So like all day today, I thought I was going to get to work, and the kids. I had the kids. I got a couple hours in. My sister took them to the uh the new remake of
Little Mermaid,
Little Mermaid. That's it, Little
the
Mermaid.
live action.
Yeah, live action. She took all four kids, which my sister is truly a saint, if you're wondering. Um, and they had a great time. But we're limping back into the week after 2 days of sickness, and also going, who's going to get sick next? You
Yeah.
know how that goes with 4 kids. It feels like you've got these 2 or 3 week kind of extended. Who gets the virus next? We were all hoping it was the Chinese food from Saturday.
Mm.
That wasn't it. That wasn't it. Panda Express really let us down there. We were hoping it was just a little foodborne illness this time.
I feel like you're making like a political statement there. Like we were hoping it was the Chinese food. It's always like the Chinese who are to blame for your illnesses.
To be
Like,
clear,
it could have been Chipotle.
it could have
No, it had
been
to be.
any sort of food, but it tends to be Chinese. Let's not pretend.
Oh, that's just
It's actually a, a conspiracy by the Chinese regime to weaken Americans through foodborne illness.
oh man.
Oh man, sorry, we're really drifting today. But it's
Well, we're at
also
a 10-minute mark, man.
okay. Well, like let's shift. This is I'm heading into my very last week of work before I start my sabbatical on Thursday. This is my very first sabbatical in 17 years of ministry, and I'm I'm excited. I'm
Okay.
also I have a little bit of trepidation. One like I keep wondering, is this like against sabbatical rules? Like you feel all this expectation of what sabbatical is supposed to be.
Yes.
And a friend invited me to like a prayer meeting with some other pastors. He's like, I don't know if this is against sabbatical rules. And I'm like, I mean, praying shouldn't be, but having a meeting should be. So I don't know. Like that's the answer. I really don't know.
Yeah, you can go and you can pray, but you can't network on any level.
Yeah, you can't talk about anything about ministry. It has to be just prayer. That's it.
That's it. You can pray for the people, but only in the
Uh-huh.
generalized sense, not for your own people.
No
That's work
strategy.
now.
You,
Yeah.
you can't pray for any sort of movement or revival because that's work.
Yeah, I feel like we need to like create like some legalistic set of rules here
Yeah, like
for
800 or
sabbatical.
900, like, just suggestions from a
Yeah,
group
yeah,
of rule makers that would just help us to be better at doing sabbatical, right?
yeah. I'm trying to combine Pharisees and sabbatical. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it. We're gonna make up a word today.
I mean, it's like there's too many soft vowels that are in like that. Yeah, it doesn't
The
sabbatical.
Pharabaticals.
The Farabaticals. There we go. You did it. You got there.
That was bad. That was bad. We usually do
Well,
better.
well, so
But tell
today's
me more about
topic,
that.
yeah, today's topic is actually like uh, intertwined with the question of sabbatical and rest and rhythms is church planting's hard, man. Honestly, ministry across the board is hard. If you've ever done it, it comes with all sorts of relational and spiritual and um, emotional and relational and physical toll because you're doing something that matters a lot
Hmm.
without much knowledge of how it's working or what's like is it working. That's a part of ministry is you're doing all this work and you never know, did we win or did we
Hmm.
lose? It's always like that. We'll see. We'll see what's going on. And so what we want to talk about a little bit today is like church planting. So the reason we just celebrated this week our local network. We've seen 70 churches planted in our valley the last 6 years, which is
Wow.
a huge just it's a testimony to God and to his people participating in some kingdom work that I want to celebrate. But as I'm kind of collating our list, like I had never done like a true total list of all the church plants. And we lost, I think the number is 7 or 8. Like there's a question mark on one still. There's like 7 or 8 that we lost along the way. So about 10% over 6 years, which is very good, like in terms of church planting. Like that's a very good percentage of ones that don't make it.
Hmm.
But as I was thinking about their stories, there are a handful of guys who didn't make it, but their churches made it, and then a handful that
Hmm.
their churches didn't make it because they didn't make it. because their lives fell apart, because their spouses left them, because their spouses wanted to leave them because of ministry, because of overwork, because of underpay, because of like the pressures and the physical toll that ministry was taking. One guy has some really serious health. Actually, two guys had really serious health issues that were exacerbated by ministry, and so their life was threatened by the very thing that they felt called to. And really, what it comes down to is the health of the church planter. Even though the church plant is not completely dependent on them, it is the Holy Spirit that does the work. They are the ones who have to be there to partner with
Right.
God. And if they're not there, what happens is the church plant falls apart most of the time. And so we really want to have a conversation about, before we dove into any of the strategies or the structures or um, the even the spiritual life of a planter, we want to start with the question of how do we stay in this thing long term? How do we commit to a lifetime of ministry and then do the things that it takes to stay in the ministry? I know when I started Gordon Conwell, the number that they used at our orientation was that only 10% of us would retire from ministry. And that felt like the right number, like just based on my experience, but it also felt like a punch in the stomach. Here I am spending, it's going to end up being $50,000 on an education. And in all likelihood, it won't be my profession. It wouldn't be the thing that I would take to my 60s or 70s and give my life to as my work. And that maybe is chilling. I think like I deprofessionalized ministry so that I could find a way to do it. Like that's a part of my story. But when you think about it, like the question is how could someone stay in long term, and how do we frame that question? So Tim, you have taken sabbaticals, and maybe we'll start by leaning on you and saying, what have you seen best practices sabbatical? What have you experienced? And just start from there.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we're talking about this, because I'm so grieved by the pastoral burnout issue. And at the same time, more than ever, we really need emotionally healthy, spiritually ready, kingdom effective leaders to guide and lead and serve the church for our coming days. So when we lose too many men and women on the cost of burnout, oh man, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. So I'm glad we're talking about this, and I, especially on this podcast, and I'll get to your question in a second, because like I find myself cheering for church planters all the time. So I have not planted. Many of my friends have, and I enjoy meeting church planters. I love the energy, and I love their stories. Every now and then I bump into a church planter where I'm like, ooh, I'm sure they were vetted well. However,
don't assume that. Do not assume that.
It seems that this person is not well. And every now and then I find myself in a conversation where, to cut to the chase, this person was burnt out, and they thought it was the structure that they were, the traditional church they were in before. And they had this gifting, and they had this energy, and they had this curiosity, and maybe a legitimate calling to plant a church, but they may have done it at the wrong time.
Well, let's dive into that. When you've seen that in your friends, and I've seen the same phenomena, what are those signals when they're telling their story that they were on the edge of burnout and that they pulled the ripcord to run away rather than it being a healthy thing? What's the tipping point? How do you know?
Yeah, I'm thinking one case in particular that I'm going to use is kind of like the representation, anecdotally here. I was talking to someone I know, and gifted, and passes all the sniff tests in all these ways. Like, oh, this guy absolutely should church plant. And when after all the excitement, after the launch, after like, the 200 people that came on Easter and like they were going to take over that, that part of the, of their community. Soon after that, he began talking about the frustrations and the people who are coming to this church very,
Mm,
very, very similarly as he talked about the previous parishioners at his previous church. And I know, like,
mm.
probably the very similar people, were coming. So like I know, the consumeristic mindset of folks. But that wasn't really what bothered me. What concerned me with the flag was like, oh, it's the same voice, it's the same perspective. So that was one.
Yeah.
Two was that he was so tired already, and it seemed like it's hard to say this stuff, here, but like this new church plant was the next thing, but it was also exhausting, and
Yeah.
his not enough had really changed between situation one and two, and I guess the third red flag for me was just that that cynicism was getting worse and worse.
Mm.
When if he was living into his calling, arguably he should be finding more joy in the challenge and in the struggle, of this life. And again, I think he was called to plant. I'm not going to question that, but the timing was really bad.
Well, I think you hit on actually probably all three things we need to talk about today, and we'll continue this on in future episodes as well. But let's just start there. That first one, he was already angry with his new people, or already frustrated with his new
Yeah.
people. Like there are good situations in ministry and there are hard situations in ministry. I think we can all acknowledge that there are externals that we do not control, about the geography, the demographics, the financial ability of people to give, like going from Watertown, Massachusetts, where I had like 30 PhDs in my congregation of 200 into, a place where most people just might have some college. Like there's like
Mhm.
a vast difference in the types of people that are going to show up. Um, so there's hard situations, but anytime you see people feeling contempt towards their people,
Yes.
like I think contempt should be a red flag in all of your life. If you feel contempt towards others, where you see them as an obstacle to to what you're trying to do, whether it's in work or in your home, contempt is like, if you hear that in a marriage, that's unless that's addressed immediately, that's the end of the marriage. Contempt is the thing that sneaks in and will ruin your soul, because it's I guess the word is, you're entitled to more, and you hold that person in contempt for not being more, for not being
Mm.
what you want them to be. So man, I think that
Mm.
is such a key piece. And so if you're in a situation where you're in an existing church, you're in youth ministry, worship pastor, executive pastor, and you're looking at the people going, I need to find some new people because these people are driving me crazy.
Mm.
Like that should be a moment where you go, hold on, let's go back to the old adage of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is wherever you go, you will be there. And you're going to take with you the same attitudes and the same perspective. And until you fix how you're feeling about ministry, and until you see the people God entrusts to you as a gift, honestly, get out. Like figure out a way to either change how you're thinking about it or pull back from ministry, because I really don't think God wants us to be a people who look at the sheep and are awful shepherds who are
Yeah.
demanding and rude and um, contemptuous towards our sheep. Like that should be a red flag. And so how did that show up in this guy when you were talking to him?
You know, I remember learning this lesson. This is one of my first lessons I learned in youth ministry when I felt like I didn't have the right kids.
Oh yeah. That's the temptation, right? If I only had that kid. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the right kids that will, create this like, really great energy, and other kids will respond to that and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I felt when he and I were having lunch, he already in some ways was like expressing, and he articulated this, you know, a lot better than what I'm describing here. I'm cutting to the chase, but he was already articulating that he doesn't have the right people
Hmm.
in the room, and and it's probably true. There were probably a few people who came to see what the new thing was, who didn't understand what the new ministry was about, but they wanted to see, and the new thing, and he was gifted in his preaching, and new is always cool. So I understand that there was probably some of that, but it felt that he didn't have like the right cool kids in the room, and he was very frustrated by that. So that was one way that was revealed. Um,
Well, and what's revealed in that is that he sees people as a way to get what he wants or what he is
mm,
hoping for. Like
mm,
it's a functional view of the people as either a path to get to where he wants or a blockage to get to what he wants, rather
mm,
than seeing the people as the purpose. Like the people who are there are the people of peace God has entrusted to you.
yeah,
And if you don't love them and care for them, the Father cannot entrust anyone else to you. And
yeah,
that should we should all feel that deeply. Like if there's people you'd rather get rid of than care for, or
mm,
get rid of rather than help grow, that's you. That's all
absolutely.
happening inside of you, not inside of them. Um, that's great. And I think that we should come back to that next week, because like that this and maybe we do a more in-depth thing on burnout as an idea, but like seeing burnout as how you feel about the people around you is a symptom of the state of your soul. Like how you look and feel about the people that are in your life has more to do with you than with them. That's
Absolutely.
that's
And,
great.
and when you're in a burnout situation, like you may not realize it, but you are in some form of a survival mode. So
Yeah.
so your empathy really sucks.
Yeah.
You can't recognize often the pain and the needs, and muster the appropriate emotional goodness to minister effectively. And so of course you have this tendency, what my friend was doing was objectifying
Yeah.
these people are in front of him, and he was in a survival mode. And of course every church planter in some sense is in a survival mode, so I
Yeah. Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that too. But when you're fighting burnout, like that was part of it. Which, going to the second piece, Robert, was like, like he was already tired. And I didn't say this, of course. Like I
Was it
am,
was this before he launched or after he launched that he was tired?
well, after it. So like they had like the big launch, they had the big Easter. And I'm probably talking to him a good 9 months after the launch. So like,
Uh-huh.
honeymoon is, kind of ending, and but like, all those things are kind of appearing. And he was already tired. And I didn't say this, even though I am sometimes a mean friend and a sarcastic friend. I can never pass up a good joke.
No,
But
you
but
you
th-
can't,
but
but
this day,
normally you do okay.
thanks, bro. But this day, like I was just like, oh my gosh, he's in trouble. And I wanted to say like, oh my gosh, you should go back to that other church. You should go back to your old church. You're not gonna make it. You're not gonna
That
make
would
it.
have been awful and
Yeah, it'd been
funny.
awful. Yeah, that's not friendship.
Yeah, no.
But I was so concerned, like he's not gonna make it, and he's going to need
Mm,
something. He's going to need something.
yeah.
Um, and he did last longer than the story would imply. It was only a few years, and I don't think he ever really got to catch his breath in the middle of that church plant.
Well, I want to go back to the first point real quick and say, I think one of the signs of burnout, for me personally, like this is one of the things I watch out for. I'm an Enneagram 7. I'm pretty much happy all the time.
Mm,
And so if I'm angry, if there's like if I just feel angry and I feel this sense of just like frustration at everything around me, that's an easy sign for me that I'm overdoing it, and that I have hit some sort of a limit, because I've lost that margin of energy to care and see the people around me as objects of affection from the one
yeah.
true God, rather than objects for me to use. And so I think like anytime you have a lot of anger, or actually any amount of anger that's ongoing,
Mm,
that's a little, flashing red
oh,
light in the
yes. check engine.
dashboard of your life. And for a lot of men, that's our primary way that we express emotion, which means that there's something deeper happening underneath you. So if you're feeling lots of anger, that means you need rest. Start with rest, because it may just be rest. You may just need some time off, and that may actually bring you back to an equilibrium emotionally.
Mhm.
If that doesn't work, then it's actually like, okay, I've got to go see somebody. I've got to talk to a counselor, because there's underlying frustration that really has to do with, I think, primarily identity stuff.
Mm,
And in church planting, what happens in church planting is you are an avatar for what the church is.
mm,
You are the embodiment of what the church is. And when people accept it or reject it, you will feel all the acceptance or all the rejection. And when you're planting a church, no matter who shows up or how many people show up or how much they give, there's some number of people who are going to look at your church website, see your preaching on Facebook, and go,
mhm.
no, thank you. And what happens in the midst of that is your identity gets tied up in the success of the ministry. Like, it's in some ways
Absolutely.
inevitable.
Absolutely.
And that's any senior leader role. Anytime you take over at a church or you plant a church, there is this, you become a big piece of what people accept or reject about what you're doing. And that's where all this deep work that God wants to do, actually, I think, is a primary reason God does church planting, is because he wants to tear down all of the ways that we built our identity around our work and our success. Because church planting is a deeply humbling thing, no matter how successful you are.
That's good.
There will be deep failure, and there will be ways that you feel disappointed about the journey, and you're going to feel anger about those things. And that's when you go, okay, I actually need to deal with some of this stuff. I've got to reformulate my identity from what I receive from the Father, and then I live and obey out of the love that the Father gives me, rather than saying, I'm going to perform so that I can create identity and bring it to the Father and hope he'll accept me, which is that reverse of the gospel that we're always doing. That's just the nature of humans. Is from Genesis in chapter 3, we basically said, I'm going to take control. I'm going to build something on my own, and hopefully God likes it.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the grain and I'm going to offer it as a sacrifice, because it's probably better than the meat that God asked me to sacrifice. I'm going to eat that fruit of the tree because I think I know better than God. And until you kind of reverse that and say, I'm going to set all of the things that I think I should do aside and receive from the Father my identity, until you've done that work, you're a threat to the people around you.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm getting into preacher mode
It's good. It's
around
good.
around
It's good. I'm
disciple
loving it.
making. But okay,
I
so
had two
that's
thoughts there. I had two
yeah,
thoughts
yeah, yeah, yeah,
on there.
yeah. Go
I
for it.
know that that moment where you're describing, you show a clip of your preaching on social media, and somebody just says, "No, I don't want that," and they may even comment negatively about it.
Yeah, they'll tell you
Uh,
why they don't like it.
yeah, this is the problem with the church today, and these preachers today. Like I've had that. That's
Yeah.
happened to me. Um, I went to this leadership symposium. This is a big lesson I learned that, like, I go back to, and I'm not even sure I learned it, but like I'm still trying to learn it, I guess. And like the idea is differentiation. So if you've read emotionally healthy spirituality stuff or Rich Villota stuff,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you understand differentiation is something that you need to figure out. Like how do you separate your identity from your actions, like from
From your
what you
production.
do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
production is a better word. And so I was in this leadership symposium class. It's like, just picture a class with like 12 of us, and the professor was explaining this. He's like, when somebody doesn't like your sermon, and they fall asleep at it or they criticize it, they're actually criticizing the preacher. They're not criticizing you, right? And that sounds like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand the difference. Well, we had one guy in our class who was just very with it. He's like, no, 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 hold on. No, I am the preacher.
There,
It's
yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
Like it's almost like the Taylor Swift song. This Taylor
Hmm.
Swift song,
I'm
like,
the problem, it's
I'm the
me. Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
It's me.
yeah, yeah.
And he's like, no, no, no. He's like, you only gave the sermon, but they're mad at the preacher. Or if you made a decision, they're mad at the decision maker.
Hmm.
And the guy was like, no, no, I put my heart, soul, strength. I preach with vulnerability. I preach like with all this like personal energy. I can't just disassociate. I can't differentiate from that. And it went back and forth. It was like a really fun ping pong, battle to watch. And finally, the professor said, "Do you think that from any one of your sermons that somebody can completely know you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a problem. If you're putting like if people can
Yeah.
like know everything about you from your sermons, then you may you may be a little imbalanced
Well,
as
it is
far as the
the it's
sermon.
the imbalance that we're talking about, though, of how much they know you versus how much you know them. And they're judging this tiny bit that they know about you, and you know nothing about them. And we're in this very vulnerable place because we've exposed ourselves without demanding connection with people. And that's why we feel
Yeah.
so just like vulnerable, like our heart and soul and mind and strength we've poured out, and then people go, nah, I've heard better.
Yeah, for better. And that was, I think, like the key thing for my friend Alan that day was it wasn't until the professor was like, it's like if you think that they know they know your identity, that's the imbalance. And when he admitted, he's like, yeah, they probably don't know me on that
Hmm.
level.
Hmm.
He's like, then they just don't like your preaching. You're fine. It was a moment. It was a moment for me because like it's like
Yeah, yeah,
he was
yeah.
speaking for me in some sense.
Well,
And
and there's going to be people that just don't like you and don't like how you live your life and don't like, how you do ministry and how you see things. And the
absolutely,
real question is, what are you going to do with that? Because that's actually going to be like 50-60% of people is going to be like, that's not my thing. How are you
absolutely.
going to deal with the constant rejection? And how do you deal with that, Tim? Like when you get those Monday morning emails or those Facebook comment notifications?
You know, I learned, and I keep learning this lesson too, but I'm never as bad as the email says that I am. And then I'm also never as good as the complimentary email that follows
As the
either.
gush. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And I think of that wonderful book Dan Allender wrote, Leading with a Limp.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, so he's talking about failure and success, and he says, I think I actually have the quote somewhere. Hold on, it's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be worth it.
It better be. I can't believe you're Google searching something in the middle of our podcast.
No, it's on an iPhone note.
Okay, okay. Do,
No, I don't have it.
do, do. Oh, there you go.
Oh man, that was a bummer. I thought I had that. But in short, he's saying, the failures aren't really us.
Hmm.
The failures are not really describing us as bad as the failures say that we are, and our successes don't really describe our achievement or the applause as much as we think. And you become a healthier person when you're not going when you're not just trying to live your life avoiding the failure, and you're not living your life trying to gain the applause, and you're
Mm,
doing your thing. You're living out of mission. You're living out of identity. And at the end of it, you ask God, can you use this for your good? And that is when you've really learned, Allender says, that is when you've really learned from failure, and when you have also learned from success.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like I'm never as bad or as good as the emails say that I am. That's one thing. So it's a posture that I bring into it to answer your question. Um, and then I don't know too. I learned this like just from just people that I've worked with over the years. Like Sunday's a new week, and I don't preach every week at my church, but like there's a whole new week of work in front of you. There's a whole new set of people to serve. There's new groups to start. There's new conversations to be had. There's challenges, God willing, He might give us the strength to help bring people to overcome that. There's transformation that is yet to happen in your life and in the lives of others. So I try to have a forward thinking mindset. If last week stunk, it stunk. Let's move past it. If last week was great, hey, that feels really good. But we can't live in that either. So let's keep moving forward.
Yeah, when you think about communication theory, and I've created something in my sermon or in my work as a minister, and it goes across time and space, and it is received by a listener, someone who's entered in. Um, I have no idea what they heard or what it meant to them. No matter how clear and precise I am as a preacher, I cannot tell you what it meant to them, and it always means something different than what I meant it to mean. And so there's the gap between me and them is this important part of, in some ways, we're really not responsible for the outcome of how God takes what we've created
Mm,
and brings it to life in someone else. I'm responsible for what I create and how I care for people and doing my best to craft something that I think is meaningful. But in some ways there's this like I'm looking through a glass and speaking through a glass darkly
mm,
and saying, who knows what God is up to through this? And in some ways, like some weeks I have real clunkers and like someone will come back and say, you know what? Something came to light in me that I had never heard that's going to stick with me for years. And you're
mm.
like, that sermon, that was horrible. Like I barely even like got across my main point. Like you're just like, that was horrible. I fell off the stage. I peed my pants a little bit. Like whatever that foible was that I thought was horrible didn't actually matter. And then sometimes I'd just like knock it out of the park. And like you get done with the sermon and you're just waiting for the hey, that was really good.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, nah, it was okay. And you're like, okay, I guess what I've learned is I'm not a good judge of what God's up to in the midst
We're
of
the
it.
worst judges.
Which in some ways gives you some freedom to say, God, I faithfully work and trust that you will create something out of it. The Holy Spirit will be convicting people and drawing people and really giving people faith to believe and helping them abide in Him. And the magic happens in the midst of their soul among community, in the face of of our our missteps and our mistakes and how we do ministry. So hopefully, if you're out there and you're a church planner, what you're taking from this is there's this work of identity you have to do, and you have to disengage from your identity being tied to the success of your ministry.
Mm,
And for me, there was one point where I just said, it doesn't matter if I lead a church for the rest of my life, I'm going to faithfully tell others about Jesus and teach
mm.
them how to walk in the way of the King. And once I settled that, like that's just what I'm going to do the rest of my life, all of a sudden the church was not the goal. The
Yeah.
church
Yeah.
was a means to the kingdom coming in
Yeah.
power. At some point, Redemption Hill is not going to exist. At some point, even an institution like Grace Chapel that's almost 70 years old at this point,
Yep.
like it is not going to exist. Almost no church makes it to the third generation. Like we're talking like 1/10 of 1% of churches will make it to a third generation. And I tried with Redemption Hill to put in a sunset clause at 15 years. We're just going to start over and just like do
Like
some
the
new
Matrix.
mistakes. Yeah, we'll just shut it down and restart it. But once you like take away the church being a representation of your value, all of a sudden you can love and care for the church, and it's not about the organization, it's about God's kingdom coming in power, and
Mhm.
that's a good place to be. Let's see. Where are we? Oh, we've been going a while. We're
Yeah,
not
I think we're gonna make this in several parts. I think this is a good place to pause. I did have a question though. As
okay.
you begin your sabbatical this week, give me something that you're really excited about, and if there's something that you're either concerned about or even anxious about.
Okay. Um, I've never done this before, and so like there's just some level of my wife and I actually had a good argument about this last week is like, what if I just waste this thing? Like what
Mm,
like what would that look like if I just blew it? And on some level, like if I spend the next 12 weeks either playing the whole time or worrying about work the whole time, I think I will have failed. Like
mm,
those are the two concerns. If I miss out, my main reason I need to have a sabbatical right now is I can't hear the Father's voice because I'm
mm,
doing too much. I lead 3 nonprofits and I have 2 businesses, and there's just too many things in my brain. And so when I get to my Sabbath on Friday night, my brain takes a whole day to just like power down.
Yeah.
like that. There's just too much
Yeah.
going on, too many text messages, too many emails for me to listen to the Father. And so the sabbatical to me is all about creating space and margin to listen to the Father. So
So good.
like that's what I'm excited about. And primarily I just want to let him speak about what's this next season for. You know, we're 7 years into planting in August. And I think that I'm I'm deeply grateful for where we are and what God's done. I'm so thankful for it. And at the same time, I started 5 things that I can't keep doing, all of them. And so God needs to continue to direct and shape how my life and work look. And I've committed that I want my life just like Jesus. I only want to do what the Father tells me to do. And if I can't hear his voice, I can't do what he's telling me to do. So that's like big thing. I've been joking for a while that you'll know that my sabbatical went well if my golf game gets down in the 80s. Like that's how you'll know. And I like on some level that's true because it'll mean that I will have slowed down enough to like have space to play around a golf every week or two. You know, that'd be nice. I'd love to hit some buckets of balls.
Nice.
But even more than that, I think my between having 4 kids and planting a church and being too busy and stressed, my body has taken a hit in terms of just my care for my body. And so I want to work hard at just like recentering into
Mhm.
um you know, I've been active. I play soccer a couple times a week and I have decent fitness and health, but you know, my body weight is not where I want it to be and my
Mhm.
stress levels are not where they want it to be. And so a reset into hopefully a rule of life that's sustainable long term. Uh and I'm really excited. I'm just gonna have lots of time. And it's, you know, I want time with my kids, but it's summer with my kids, which can be like really special in terms of like camping and trips and adventure and just like unhurried space with them. We're gonna rebuild and, you know, add on to the fort, the tree fort that I built for
Oh,
them a
wow.
couple summers ago. They've been waiting for this every the last 3 summers. They've just been like, Dad, you said you were gonna paint that thing and you were gonna add a roof. And like they're shaming me at this point. It's not even disappointment. It's like, Dad, you are failing and you are a liar because you have not done these things. And it's time for me
They've called like
to
lawyers, like lawyers
yeah,
after
they're
you right
looking into
now.
verbal contracts and saying, Dad, you actually promised, and we're gonna go after damages and hopefully get this done by somebody else. So
That's great.
so this
You know,
summer, that's a big piece.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. One of my friends went on sabbatical last summer. We caught up afterwards. He said, I asked him, like, how do you feel? And he's like, yeah, I know. I'm supposed to come back and tell you that like everything is great. And I've just like my soul has been fully renewed and I feel amazing. And all. He's like, here's the truth. I'm still tired, but I feel a lot better. And
Well,
I was like,
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
take
yeah.
that. Wow,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's like one of like the I don't know, the myths of sabbaticals and even of
Yeah.
Sabbath,
Hmm.
um, that if that these practices, these actions will just fix it. And
No.
often these things they create space to begin fixing, or they create space to to move from fatigue, to move from burnout to fatigue to a more sustainable rhythm,
Hmm.
where you can hear the Father again in your words. I love that language. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the before and after of your words on the other side of your sabbatical.
Well, you know, I'm still 40 and I still have 4 little kids. So like the level of tired in my life is not
Right, that's not changing.
people keep asking me, are you going to travel? And I'm like, are you kidding me? How would I functionally travel with my life right now? There's no
Like,
way. So
I don't want to start a new thing here, but like, what if we had like sabbaticals for kids? So like you would probably feel better if the
they
kids
went
went on
away.
sabbatical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I put them like I send my 2-year-old to like a 3-week away camp. That's now we're talking.
Yeah, you would feel better. We were doing this all
All
wrong
of
this
us
whole
would feel
time.
my 2-year-old would feel abandoned and probably have issues the rest of her life, but I would be much better.
Yeah, let's not do that. Terrible
All
idea.
right. Well, so next week we're gonna talk again next week, and we're gonna dive into like that the question of how tired are you? Because I think that like
Yes.
that is a very actually a really normal experience post-launch, you have the letdown of the, before
Yeah.
you launching, it's all a an intellectual exercise, and then you hit post-launch and like, crap, I got to do this every Sunday for the rest of my life. And there's like this settling in that happens. And it's not as exciting year two, and you have to find ways to
Yeah.
settle in a different way. So I think I want to talk about that and energy, because managing your energy is actually a crazy important part of church planting that we need to talk about, and how physical the work is, and like how many chairs and stages you're going to move over the course of the first
I was
five
just thinking about the
years.
chairs.
With the chairs,
Do,
man, they
do
kill
the
you.
chairs get heavier or lighter in year two?
You're stronger. The chairs don't change. You're just stronger.
Sorry. That's early.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll touch on that next week, and then I think we're also going to dive into more of the how do we prevent burnout?
Mm,
Not just what are the signs of it, but what are the sorts of rhythms? And I think rule of life and rhythms of life are two of the big pieces that we can talk. Maybe I should even do an interview with Steve Macchia, just like
oh,
get him
that'd
in
be
here and
amazing.
talk rule of life. Okay. Well, thanks Tim for making some time this week. We'll have to do it again next Monday, maybe.
Perfect.
We'll figure it out. Thanks for being here. If you're one of our true listeners, we pay attention to who's listening, and we're thankful for every single one of you, because it means that we're serving you, and we're glad that
Mm.
this is something you want. And if you're still listening, you must really like this thing, or you forgot to turn it off at some point. It's just playing in the background. I don't know. But if you're still here, remember, if you want to reach the people no one else is reaching, you got to go where no one else is going and do what no one else is willing to do. Thanks for being here, Church Planner. See you next week.